This is a relay project.
Seriously?
Seriously starts now. Here's Supriya and Ryan.
Hey, it's Wednesday, September 14th, and you're listening to Seriously with Supriya and Ryan. I am Supriya Devetti in Toronto.
I'm Ryan Jesperson in Edmonton. What's up, my friend?
Oh, man, lots to get to. The Conservative Party leadership race has ended, and to the surprise of everyone, no, just kidding, Pierre Poilievre won. He won decisively, like 68% on the first ballot, so he's got that going for him.
And it's him versus the media already.
Yeah. And, you know, we'll get into those details, obviously, a little bit later on in the show, but he had this great, acceptance speech the night of the leadership race. He had a great sort of first introduction to his Conservative caucus as leader. You know, he's got his adorable baby there, his beautiful wife next to him. It was very humble in his remarks, talking about how he's going to unify the party and he's the leader for everyone. And then, the next night happened and he's at war with the media already.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think probably a calculated move. And his predecessor 2 leaders ago, Andrew Scheer, had already kind of set the tone with some pretty scathing assessments of the state of Canadian media just a short time prior to that. So we understand the drum that they're going to be banging. You know, you mentioned Poilievre's acceptance speech, and I thought it was really well done. And it's kind of interesting what happens at the conclusion of a leadership race. Virtually everybody is happy to see it done. And with a solid and positive and optimistic acceptance speech, oftentimes the new leader can automatically cause any concerns around their campaign tactics to evaporate. But Poilievre didn't do that. The next day, he doubled down on a lot of that narrative, and I think sets the tone for what the next year or two is going to look like. For good reason, I think a lot of people feel a bit of a pit in their stomach. Yeah,
and it's worth noting on that, in that vein, Alain Reyes, who was a Quebec MP, quit the CPC caucus, and then Pierre's camp, I guess, sent out a message to Alain's constituents, basically saying that he should resign. So that's something. Have you ever seen this story happening in the news in the background, Ryan, as well? Like a bunch of people, like grown adults, are pissed that the Little Mermaid is going to be black now, and this is apparently a huge cause for concern.
Yeah, and this on the heels of everybody, and I'm going to get out of my depth here because I don't know a lot about the fantasy series Game of Thrones or anything like that, but my understanding is that this new spin-off series has people of color in these fantasy roles, and people can't believe that the ghouls and the gremlins and the goblins that have magical powers could also be black. I'm not sure. It seems to be a bit of a moment of reckoning for a lot of people, but there was a good news story that came out of that Little Mermaid debacle. Did you see was it a TikTok, I think, or an Instagram video of young kids, black kids, seeing the trailer for the first time? I was just watching it enthralled. Beautiful stuff. And we talked about representation in media.
Yeah, and it matters, right? And this is why it matters, to see the faces of those kids just light up at being represented on screen. Anyway, you're not going to convince racists, but
the talking Little Mermaid is black, and it's the color of her skin that people find unbelievable about the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
There you have it. Was Poilievre's camp, do you think, out of line in getting in touch with Reyes' constituents? They want to fight to keep that territory. It's valuable ground. That's where they've got to keep winning. And this new tone, this Poilievre tone, is going to be quite a bit more combative than what we've seen from Aaron O'Toole. Are you surprised in the least?
No, I don't think I'm surprised in the least. And I don't think anybody should really be surprised, given that Pierre's own camp was sort of giving these signals, right? That he wasn't going to pivot. There wasn't going to be a ton of tempering down of his tone or his rhetoric. You know, his style has very much been throughout this leadership campaign to like keep kicking folks, even when they're down, and even when like he's very clear the winner, and the winner by a quite a large margin. So yeah, I think this was expected, and it will be interesting to see. I mean, I don't think independents have a ton of history of being able to win elections in this country, for good or for bad, whatever that may be. But it'll be interesting to see if he runs again, I guess.
Yeah.
I that is. Yeah.
Yeah. No kidding. Nobody ever wins as an independent. Jody Wilson-Raybould won.
She did. Yeah, that's true.
I'm trying to think of who else has an Alberta reference. Brent Rathgaber was a pretty popular Conservative MP out of St. Albert back in the day, but he walked out of step with Stephen Harper on something and was banished to wander in the desert as an independent MP. Sought re-election in St. Albert, was very popular, and got his ass handed to him by Michael Cooper, who is actually a previous member of his staff. Michael Cooper now one of those big Poilievre supporters that we see out of the province of Alberta. Hey, let me ask you this before we get any further. For a lot of people across the country, the last couple of days, and maybe even still, they're wondering whether or not they've got next Monday off. It's a federal holiday, a national day of mourning to observe the passing and, of course, the funeral around Queen Elizabeth II as we transition to King Charles III and his reign. What's the buzz? What's the scuttlebutt around you? Are most people getting the day off, or are most people business as usual on Monday?
I think Ontario's business as usual on Monday. The premier said that he wants kids to go to school so that they can learn, I guess, about the monarchy. The TTC, so the Transit Commission here in Toronto, is weirdly pausing service for 96 seconds to commemorate the Queen, which seems like an odd way to do it, but whatever. British Columbia, I think, is getting the day off. It was with schools and stuff closed, but I mean, they are called British Columbia, so I guess that makes sense. What's happening in Alberta? Yeah,
Alberta's going to be business as usual as well, and I'm a little surprised. I would have thought that our outgoing premier, and I don't mean gregarious, I mean he's resigned and he'll soon be gone. Jason Kenney is, such a big fan of that kind of stuff. Sort of the whole British fascination of his. He's quoting Churchill all the time. He's oftentimes referring to, Dominion Day as opposed to Canada Day and things like that. But yeah, Alberta will not observe it. It'll be business as usual. I'm not really surprised. I ran a unofficial, unscientific Twitter poll, 24 hours. I think
best
about
kind of polls.
25. Yeah, they're the best ones. 2,500 people or so responded, and more than 2/3 business as usual. So I think about 10% of people said that their workplace was going to give them the day off. So certainly the minority there.
Do you want the day off? I kind of want it off, but whatever.
I want all the days off.
Yeah.
So, if we win the lottery, I'm quitting everything except for this podcast. I would never quit you, Supriya. Last week we saw a pretty wild story hit the headlines, right, about fraudulent credentials in police training. And as it turns out, several experts who were training police on crisis intervention, PTSD response, and other really critical issues actually had false credentials from what they call degree mills. So in the last month alone, we've heard about nurses, healthcare aides, and now police with fake credentials. The problem of degree mills and fraudulent credentials has been on the rise in recent years, and if you're a regulator, an association, or a licensing body, it's more important now than ever before to provide trustworthy training.
And if you provide any type of online training, you need a trusted training partner to help you prevent fraud before it happens. That's why we want to tell you about We Know Training. With over 20 years of industry experience, We Know Training is the one-stop solution partner that enables associations, regulators, and nonprofits worldwide to develop, deliver, and monetize training that matters. With in-house customer support, e-learning development, proprietary LMS, and marketing, let We Know Training handle your online training and content needs so you and your team can get back to doing what you and your organization do best. Sure, a plug-and-play LMS software might be what you're used to, but imagine what your organization can do with support. You'll be in good company with success stories from We Know Training partners like the Liquor and Cannabis Regulatory Branch of British Columbia, the Alberta Hunter Education Instructors Association, and the College of Midwives of Ontario.
We Know Training can help you reach a larger audience, monetize your training program, create impactful courses hassle-free, and develop top-tier training to generate reoccurring revenue. As a fully managed solution partner, We Know Training handles every step along the way. They make online learning engaging, fun, and your learners will actually retain and apply the information in the real world. If you're looking for a partner who will provide high-stakes training without the stress, give We Know Training a call. You can learn more on their website, weknowtraining.ca.
The Lead.
Right now, youth and newcomers can't get a home because local government gatekeepers block housing with heavy fees and long delays for building permits, leaving us with the fewest houses per capita of any country in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on. A Poilievre government will require big cities that want federal infrastructure money to speed up and lower the cost of permits to approve affordable housing around all transit stations so that our young people can live there and don't even need to afford a car.
So that was a snippet of Pierre's acceptance speech from Saturday night after the leadership race revealed that he was the decisive winner. And there's two things, Ryan, that strike me about his speech. Number one is that it really doesn't sound like rhetoric that would be coming from a traditional, conservative politician in this country.
You mean transit?
Well, transit, and just the fact that he's like prioritizing housing, right?
Yep.
And that leads me to my second point, which is that there's no other politician, federally at least, in Canada, that has been talking about housing with the authoritativeness and the urgency I think that the issue deserves. Because if you're under 40 in this country, right, and you're not in a home right now, this is one of your top concerns. Affordability is huge. And we've, positioned our housing market in this country to just and us accepting our housing market to be this way of just going up and up and up and up and being like, I guess it's okay, except it's not okay. And we're seeing, real ramifications of it.
You and I have been talking a lot about who is buying those memberships and then who turned out to vote for Pierre Poilievre in the leadership and who he will rely on as he builds this, what appears to be almost a new or at least reinvigorated base of support for the Conservative Party of Canada. You made the point a few episodes of Seriously ago that you're not convinced that this is just bringing people back to the fold from the PPC or from not voting before. This is new people that otherwise probably might not even give a damn about politics. And there's little things, little words and phrases and concepts and ideas and realities that Poilievre is touching on that are really smart and they're going to resonate with people, like local government gatekeepers, right? Barriers, delayed development permits. That's the type of thing where somebody's going to hear that and go, yes, right? They're going to bang. That's us. That's me. Oh, somebody at the federal level is addressing this. Not just these vague sort of comments about red tape reduction, but specifically in one area, something that really drives people nuts. And I think you see insights there as well into who he sees as really fertile ground for gleaning new support. And that's young people, right? Who looks, for the most part, generally speaking, who prioritizes things like affordable housing or a first-time home buyer's incentive or proximity to transit within city centers. It's the young professionals.
Yeah, totally. And so there are two interesting, I think, further things that come out of this. And one is to your point, getting and galvanizing those folks that are under 40 that, want to buy a home, that are out of a home right now, and, getting them into the Conservative fold. The other aspect, I think, is that it really does put both the NDP and the Liberals in a position where Pierre basically has just to roll up and say, hey, these two idiots haven't done anything for you when it comes to housing. Vote for me because I have this plan and I'm at least going to help to get some of this done. And, the Liberals have been in power for quite some time now. If the NDP Liberal deal holds and the next election is in 2025, I mean, we're talking about 10 years, right? It's very hard to win a fourth mandate after that. And so it will be interesting to see what the Liberals and the NDP come up with on housing because they have to do something. And this leads to the other aspect of this, which is, can we actually have a grown-up conversation on housing? Because in order for housing prices to go down, people are going to have to lose equity in their homes. And I don't know if we're prepared to have that conversation.
It'll be interesting to see how, in particular, the governing Liberals respond to this. And you get the early impression that they might be caught on their heels a little bit. Now, it's still so early that I'm not sure that's a fair assessment, but we did
No,
see...
I think it's fair. Yeah.
We did see the Prime Minister, upon confirmation that Pierre Poilievre was the leader, the worst kept secret in maybe the history of Ottawa, or at least top 10, that Justin Trudeau went on the offensive and called out his stance on Bitcoin as an example, saying that, Poilievre's suggestion that people could avoid inflation would have listened to him, cashed in on the Bitcoin boom, and then subsequently lost all their life savings. Not entirely accurate, but you get the sense. He wants to establish that doubt. He wants to point out that he believes these to be somewhat shallow or foundationless theories, but the more that they gain traction, the Liberals are going to have to, like you said, come up with compelling counterpoints about why they should be trusted to help, in particular, young and middle-aged people navigate these next few years of, in particular, economic uncertainty. So I guess the ball's in their court now.
It is. And I mean, I hope they come up with a housing plan that's been a little bit better than previous housing initiatives, because all they've really done while they've been in government is to, for the most part, provide upper middle class folks with more relief without going, into folks that need more help in terms of what their, economic or social status is. And I don't know if they're doing that. And, the bank of mom and dad is getting hit hard with inflation as well. And so it's going to be harder and harder for boomers to basically help out their kids on this. And it's I don't know, it's just the whole thing is bad, where we're going towards a situation where if folks can't even afford a home to live, whether we're talking about an actual a home to buy or a home to rent, because rent is incredibly high as well, then it's just a very bad recipe for economic and strife.
Yeah, I don't want to take us too far into the weeds. We promise to do this in under a half hour every week. But I will point out also, and you and I have talked about this off camera, that bank of mom and dad or the bank of grandma and grandpa or whatever, let's call it folks' nest eggs, the equity in their homes also needs to be considered. Whether you're taking a look at, taxes aimed at foreign investors like we've seen in the West Coast, or measures in Ontario or other parts of Canada, even, the stress tests, not as strong of an example when it comes to mortgages across the country right now. People are going to push back as well. You want to make home ownership more affordable. You want to slow the housing market to keep it sustainable as we understand it. But at the same time, what are you saying to the people whose retirement depends on the equity in their homes? And when government policy starts to take aim at that, then you're going to have consternation and protest from both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's one thing when you're my age and you own a home and you still have a ton of working years ahead of you, right? But it's a very different thing if you are really reliant on your house in and of itself as being your retirement package. And that'll be interesting once we get into more details about this as it goes on. But look, we've talked about housing. He had this great night, right? As I said, he had a great first introduction to caucus, and then comes his first, statement to the media. I guess his camp had made it very clear that he wasn't going to take questions, right? This pissed off, presumably, David Akin of Global News. He's the chief political correspondent over there. And so Akin keeps yelling out these questions about how firing the Bank of Canada governor is going to help inflation. Poilievre then calls Akin a liberal heckler, but we do have the video here. It's from True North. Everyone should take a listen or watch it for themselves right now.
We have basically a liberal heckler who snuck in here today to, well, apparently, right. Are you going to let me make my statement?
From the guy who actually reported first on the Prime Minister breaking the law.
Yeah. Are you going to let me make my
statement?
statement?
Ask a question. Say yes.
I've actually never seen you heckling the Prime Minister.
Before. Ask Minister Baird back
heckling
in the day.
The Prime Minister. Look, bottom line is this.
I'm going to take some questions at the end of the statement.
Yes, I'll be taking two questions at the very end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to start my statement again, and hopefully this time without interruption from the liberal heckling gathering here.
Okay, so just really quickly to let people know before we get into the actual meat of that video, it is worth noting that the Poilievre camp, or I guess now the Conservative Party, I should say, very quickly thereafter of that video, getting put out there, put out a fundraising appeal, basically saying that, David Akin of Global News, like they named him in the email, was heckling him. And David Akin did eventually take to Twitter and apologize. Basically saying that he should have made the point better of wanting to ask a question, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of people reached out, said it was rude, and he apologizes. So I guess that's all well and good. But, one aspect to this is that we've got, the Rebel and True North put out videos very quickly of the incident. Both essentially working as proxies for rapid response, which, good or bad, that is what it is. That's the environment now. But do you think this hurts Pierre's kind of introduction to the Canadian people in any way?
No, I think more than anything, it hurts David Akin's reputation, to be honest with you. And this email that went out from the Conservatives, the Poilievre camp, the fundraising email, alleges also, by the way, that he was hurling obscenities, that he was swearing, which David Akin has since denied publicly. But yeah, we can't count on the media, says the email, to communicate our message to Canadians. We have to go around them and their biased coverage. And to do that, we need your help. Chip in, click here to help us go around the biased media. I mean, it's Donald Trump all over again. Does it help Poilievre's brand? I mean, with whom? You know, with his existing supporters, sure. With people that are looking for a combative, unapologetic, somewhat, pardon me, prickish conservative party, yeah, it'll help. For average, ordinary folks that expect political correspondents to behave with some decorum and expect politicians to be available and transparent, I think both of their reputations take a ding here. What do you think?
So look, I think anybody who knows David Akin knows that he is a dogged reporter, irrespective of who the politician is, right? You kind of heard in that video clip, he is the one who broke the Aga Khan, Justin Trudeau going on vacation to his island story, right? He also, when the prime minister it was known during the 2019 campaign, when the story broke that he was that he wore blackface, Akin straight up was like, so you're going to resign now, right? Like, so Akin isn't a partisan. And I don't even think Pierre's camp or the Conservative Party really actually believes that Akin is some sort of like secret liberal or anything, which kind of makes this whole thing worse because it's somewhat inauthentic.
Right.
But I think, just looking at this a little bit further back, to your point, I hate comparisons to Trump. Like, I hate them. I think most of them are lazy. And I think particularly in a Canadian context, they don't necessarily tend to fit. But looking at that exchange, the first thing I thought of when I saw the video was just Jim Acosta and Donald Trump, Jim Acosta being of CNN, right? And them going at it. And I think for most Canadians, they see something like that and it does turn them off, because irrespective of whether or not Pierre comes off as a jerk or whatever you want to say in that exchange, I think more than that, it also kind of makes him look weak. Like he can't answer a question, or that he can't control a situation, right? And that he kind of lets the questioning knock him off his game a little bit. And I think that if he continues to do, will have more of a sticking factor to it than the being a jerk quality would be in this case.
Yeah. I wonder if, and I don't even know if I believe this, but let me just throw it out there. Every major party leader is following a playbook. We know that to be true. Yeah. Does Justin Trudeau just make it look easier than Pierre Poilievre? Does Pierre Poilievre just make it look more obvious that he's following the playbook? Trudeau hasn't always been available for candid comments and questions. I will say in my own orbit, he has been. He did 15 minutes on my show, Real Talk, without any questions supplied ahead of time. Pierre Poilievre wouldn't even do an interview, so take that for what it's worth. I think Canadians expect transparency, and at some point, I think that this could blow up in Poilievre's face.
Yeah, I think it could. And one other really quick thing, because I know we promised to make this like a pizza in the 90s under 30 minutes or less. But I want to just point
what
out
a great
that, like,
billboard, like pizza
right?
in the 90s.
Yeah.
The glory days.
The interesting thing I think that's going to really stick with a lot of people about this is that, to your point about expecting, a certain degree of transparency from politicians, I think is certainly true. But I think the further, the more visceral thing is that I think we just want our politicians to not sort of be constantly on attack. And that certainly appeals to a certain demographic, right? Because there is this like meta narrative that's sort of developing amongst a lot of journalists and media chattering types that are saying that, well, this is all, Pierre playing 3D chess. This is all part of the plan. The second Akin went at him, he knew in his head he was going to have a fundraiser out of it. And this was going to appeal to the folks that he needs to appeal to. Are there enough people in Canada that appeals to, though? And that's what I'm not sure of. If the kind of thing that you can scale in the US with, Trumpism, if you can scale that in this country. And I guess that's what remains to be seen.
Seriously?
And so to my Democratic friends, you're going around calling all of us every name you can think of. We're a bunch of wackos. Your idea is wacko, not ours. Let's vote. Let's vote. Give me a chance to vote on this bill.
So not so much about state rights, evidently. That was Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. And that's because we clipped him there because he introduced legislation yesterday that would institute a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy, which, just rethrows the entire abortion debate really front and center when I think the Republicans were trying to avoid this issue, or at least seemingly trying to avoid this issue for the most part in the lead up to November midterms.
Can you imagine you're Mitch McConnell and you're 8 weeks out from midterm elections and Lindsey Graham drops this on you? Jared Yates texted on Real Talk, just on people can check out the September 14th episode. He describes this as a civil war for control over the Republican Party.
Yeah, and how could it not be, right? This is a huge fuck you to Mitch McConnell. And I can't imagine something, similar happening with Chuck Schumer, on the Democratic side, losing control of his people in that same way. And I mean, the Democrats have seen, at least in some key states, an increase in registrations from women going to vote, presumably because of, abortion, quote unquote, being on the ballot, so to say, in November. And I can't imagine this necessarily going well for the Republicans. But I mean, I've been wrong before, I guess.
So what do you think the strategy is here? Like, it's a divisive move within the Republican Party. It, to me, galvanizes, mobilizes, enrages not just Democrats, but potential Democrats or otherwise apathetic voters that'll be turning out now. I mean, even within the Republican loyalists, I mean, Team GOP, there's going to be a lot of people, maybe women in particular, or just maybe more reasonable people sitting there saying this is a bad look for this party. Like it seems to me to be like stapling both your feet to the floor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I guess maybe, Lindsey Graham thinks that there are enough people that hate women enough, or at least don't think women should have control over their own bodies enough, that this is a winning ticket. Otherwise, he can't be we think he's a secret plant trying to bomb it for the Republicans, right?
What's going on? It's just for people. I mean, most people hear this on the podcast, but you see it on YouTube. If you see even him at the podium, he's surrounded by women. And then there's just this old white dude in a suit talking about where they're going to go with abortion. I mean, even the fact, they're calling us every name in the book, wacko, you're the wackos. Like, what is this? What is this, the playground? Like, it just honestly, to me, none of this makes sense whatsoever, but nothing really has out of the U.S., maybe aside from Biden's win, and even that, a tiny little bit cringe, but I digress. Again, our neighbors to the south.
Yeah, let's just think of American women at this time, because it's not going to be an easy slog for them coming up the next little bit. Yeah, actually,
seriously.
Yeah, women will die. That's it for us on this episode of Seriously. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram at SeriouslyPod, on Twitter at Supriya and Ryan, and you can always check us out on our website, seriouslypod.com.
It means a ton to us when you subscribe to our YouTube channel, when you subscribe to our podcast. And if you're listening to the pod right now, check out that share button. It's where you can share Seriously with anybody else who you think might benefit from checking out what we're putting out there every single Wednesday in 30 minutes or less. Supriya, we'll see you again soon.
Looking forward to it.
Seriously is hosted by Supriya Dwivedi and Ryan Jesperson. Technical producer, John Hicks. Executive producer, Josh Dunford. Account coordinator, Lawrence Terlego. General manager, Katie Cook-Chivers. Human resources, Lena Shepard. Voiceover by me, Tangi. Seriously is a relay project. For more, check out seriouslypod.com.